Compliance is a profession where people work tirelessly to make the world a better place. And there are hundreds of amazing and inspiring women who have helped the field develop into what it is today. Great Women in Compliance is part of the Compliance Podcast Network, so join Mary, Shirley, and Lisa Fine as they talk with women in compliance who are making a difference.
Hi, you're listening to the Great Women in Compliance podcast on the Compliance Podcast Network. We are also sponsored by Corporate Compliance Insights. Mary, Shirley, and I are very excited about this episode. It's being recorded and released during February, which is Black History Month in the U.S. I am so excited to have Jennifer Newton back with us. For those of you who don't know, Jennifer is the founder and the CEO of the National Association of Black Compliance and Risk Management Professionals, NABCRMP. NABCRMP is dedicated to networking, promotion, and the advancement of Black risk management professionals, and has really become a huge influence very quickly in our community. I first spoke with Jennifer back in July of 2020 when NABCRMP was just starting. I think it might have been like right as you came out of the gate. And now it's become such a phenomenon. In under 2 years, they've built a large membership, mentoring, supporting current and future leaders and members of the risk and compliance professional community. They've had their first annual meeting. And they're not only leading the discussions about DE&I in our profession, they're definitely making our profession better, more inclusive, and so grateful for the work you've done. But even more than that, I'm just so thrilled that you've come back to talk to us about it a couple of years later. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm so excited to be here and to be talking to you about where we are in terms of an organization. We've come so far in such little time, and there's just so much movement and so much support that we've received from the industry, from compliance and risk professionals themselves, from persons who are just looking to just support the organization. It's been just really great to see. And so really excited to talk about all of the different changes that have occurred.
Yeah. Well, before we do that, let's just quickly talk about you, because one thing that you did you also have a day job, and you changed your day job from a law firm role to an in-house role. How is it going, and what was it like to make that move for you during the pandemic? I know, I just find it really interesting, the experiences that people are having.
Yeah, so I did make a transition to another role during what I would say the height of the pandemic, and similar to other folks there. Was just a vast array of opportunities that I found myself taking part of, and so this new role that I'm in is working internally to assist the organization and the business clients that I serve with understanding risk management from a legal perspective. And so it's not very far from where I have come from and the work that I've done in my prior roles. It actually dovetails very nicely because it combines my legal substantive knowledge with my understanding of risk management and how frameworks are built around to manage risk and compliance. So it's been really great so far, and I just look forward to continuing to evolve in that area and grow in that specific space.
Well, that is fantastic. So now let's switch back to NABCRMP. And for those of you who are listening who may not know about NABCRMP, can you talk a little bit about your journey to start it and the mission of the organization?
Sure, Lisa, happy to. And as everyone can see, I'm a Black woman, and so as a Black woman, I have myself been on the receiving end of stereotypes, microaggressions. I've even had some occurrences of blatant discrimination on a couple of countless number of occasions. And I learned over the time to speak up for myself and to be my biggest advocate. And I think that by not speaking up and having support, I do a disservice to those that will come behind me. And so in doing so, that's caused me to actually lose and walk away from a lot of opportunities. But I think it's contributed to my story and my character. And it's also what led me to create the association. And it's intended simply like what you mentioned, Lisa, to inspire, to encourage, and to support the new generation of legal and compliance professionals that are going to be coming into this space. And so the goal is to make it a lot more easier for the pathway than it was for a lot of us coming into the profession.
And I mean, I think it's just such an important goal, both in terms of, removing barriers to entry, and then after that, helping encourage and grow people to make this profession that is encouraging and safe and comfortable to everyone, but particularly for people of color, so that there are, fewer experiences than some of the ones that you have lived through. And I think a lot of us feel, a lot of people have gone into ethics and compliance with some of those things in mind. But I mean, from those ideas and your experiences, it's really evolved. Can you talk a little bit about, where you are now and how, in particular, I'd love to hear, I listened to some of the summit, but, some of the summit from last year, it was fabulous. How you got to that, because that was a fantastic event.
Yeah, so we have since our launch. So and just for the folks who aren't aware of the association, so it was really the after the racial protests during the summer of 2020 that really helped to serve as the catalyst for the launch of NABCRMP. And like I mentioned, as an African American myself and working in legal risk compliance, I couldn't help but think about like the special role that we as compliance professionals and risk professionals play in advancing social change. And so what's important to take away from that understanding is that we have a role as individual leaders to move the needle forward and to continue to facilitate the dialogue of implementing organizational change. And so that's what we're seeking to do as an organization. And in that regard, we have built lots of partnerships right now with the industry. We have about 20 corporate members. So we went from 0 to 20 corporate members that cover a variety of different industries, a variety of different roles in compliance. We have folks who are members that have roles such as in-house counsel, general counsel, chief compliance officers, risk officers, policy procedure specialists. I mean, it runs the gamut. And so we have been fortunate enough to make those partnerships in order to be able to source the information that will allow us to start to make change in the industry and to start working with the industry to be able to build meaningful pathways into the profession in a way that makes sense for their organization and that makes sense for individuals that are trying to navigate. And then similarly, we have increased our individual membership, just the amount of folks that have joined. We're about 300 members now, and those members range from all across the United States, but also international. We have members that reside in the UK. We have members that are in Canada. We even have some corporate partners that are based out of Canada. And so what that says to us is that there is really, really a need for the association and the work that we're doing. I think everyone agrees that there is value in increasing diversity, creating equity and inclusion in all corporate settings, including compliance and risk. And Lisa, as you know, I have a saying, diversity, equity, and inclusion are integral aspects to risk management. And that's extremely important. We wholeheartedly believe that. And I think organizations are growing increasingly aware of that and are doing now things to support that in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that from your saying and from our conversations, talking about if you're not getting all the diverse viewpoints at the table, it's not just a right thing to do. We'll talk about this a little bit as we go along, but not only is it not, it's wrong in a lot of different ways, but in terms of a fairly practical risk assessment, risk management, risk evaluation standpoint, you are actually missing the diverse viewpoints you need to pinpoint and and recognize risk and assess it properly.
Exactly.
And I think that to me is one of the things that has always resonated so much. And I think about that a lot in terms of any risk assessment I'm doing. Who is it that's actually looking at this?
Exactly.
All different levels. And I think one of the things to do with that too is make sure that you have a diverse group of people getting the opportunities to move forward and be a part of those teams, maybe in a more junior perspective or other things. It's not just the decision makers where while we do need diversity there, but everywhere throughout that process. So growing with that, leadership and that, and future leaders.
Right. That's exactly right, Lisa. And when we talk about systems and risk management, we're really talking about people. And as individuals, we can't help but to bring our backgrounds and ourselves to our jobs, our workplaces. And so we come with our historical context and our perspective, and that's valuable. And we know that as when you're trying to have an effective risk management system, it requires, like you mentioned, the ability to effectively identify and assess risk in all of its forms. And that involves being able to understand risk from different diverse perspectives and different vantage points of view from different stakeholders, including employees, like you mentioned, regulators, customers, your suppliers. You want them to be diverse as well. An organization that doesn't really do that can't really effectively, to me, identify and manage the full spectrum of risk because they don't have that perspective. And from my experience, the failure to create those diverse teams, folks that are looking at things from all different angles and from their historical context, creates blind spots in decision making. And that essentially leads to increased risk for organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to reflect a second. You had mentioned earlier about some of your corporate partnerships, and you've got some pretty big names that have gotten involved with you all early on. So you've grown really quickly in a year. There've got to be a lot of opportunities that come from that, and some challenges that come from that. As you've built that, are there some lessons learned that you've had over those period of time, or how do you best balance the needs of all suddenly these well-meaning and voluminous number of people and organizations trying to help?
Yeah. So first, Lisa, that's a good problem for us. Growth is always wonderful, and especially in this climate where we're having a lot of economical challenge tied to the pandemic and other social climate issues. But we have been fortunate enough to be growing at a time like this, and the transition from a LinkedIn group to a nonprofit association has been wonderful. It's been a smooth transition, and I think that because we are really the only organization of our kind, I understood that there would be a need for the association. But like you mentioned, what's been really surprising is this rapid growth of the organization and the willingness of the industry to be so supportive. And one of the surprising things that we've learned, Lisa, to your question, is that there are a lot of opportunities out there. There are actually, what we're learning is more opportunities than folks that are willing or comfortable enough to take them. And we know that organizations value our association as partners in being able to identify and source talent. And so we are in the conundrum of trying to pair this diverse talent with the industry, and trying to pair our members, our talent source, with the opportunities that are presenting themselves from even industry partners, trade associations. And so oftentimes what we find is that there are a lot more opportunities than individuals that we have within our networks that are comfortable. And so what we learned is that we need to focus a lot on leadership development and getting folks ready, trained for these opportunities. I think a lot of individuals didn't necessarily have the opportunity to be mentored. And so there is that trepidation of not wanting to put themselves out there. And so we are sort of changing our focus and focusing now on building that professional development, that skill set that will allow our members and our networks to be able to take on these opportunities that we are being inundated with. So, but again, it's a great thing. We appreciate our supportive partners, our industry partners, our corporate members, individuals that reach out to us with unique opportunities, regardless of whether we have someone directly within our membership. We will reach out to try to find individuals to source those opportunities, because we don't want those to go away. And we want to continue to be seen by our partners in the industry as a talent source, so that there is no excuse as to finding diverse talent. And so that's been the challenge. But again, Lisa, it's a very good one. And we're so appreciative of like the overwhelming support that we've gotten over time.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. One of the things as you're speaking that I keep thinking of is, how can those of us out here help with those objectives of helping building leadership, mentorship, giving people the confidence to maybe go out and speak where you might not have done it before. I mean, we were talking about that. I still get really nervous when I speak, and often even before we start the podcast, because I'm so impressed with everyone else doing it. But to be able to just kind of get out there and be prepared to do that is a huge psychological jump for people, especially people who are junior. I mean, we taught. So I guess one practical question is, how can those of us who want to help and really build a community, reach out without a way that we're overwhelming more? It's a good problem, but for the timing and for the other things. So how do we do our best job at that?
Well, I can tell you what we're doing as an association to facilitate that. So we are actually going to be launching a mentorship and a sponsorship program that will allow individuals to engage NABCRMP in a way that provides value to younger professionals and students who are looking for that sort of coaching that you're talking about, that mentorship and that preparation. But also, I think individually as professionals who are working in their own spheres of influence, one of the things that you can do individually is to look at who you think you would be receptive to mentorship. Look within your organizations and provide that kind of coaching and mentorship when you see that there is an opportunity, a person that has potential. Invest your time. I think that we all have lots of power and ability to shape our own spheres of influence. And so one of the things that we can do as compliance professionals is to shape our current background, shape our current setting, and look at our own individual teams and see how you can sort of change the trajectory of folks who may need the help and are willing and receptive, and you see that potential.
Yeah, I think that's something to keep looking for internally. And I would also say, on the other hand, if you're somebody who you like someone in your organization or you like someone out there, I know it can be daunting, but reach out. Basically give yourself a few days to kind of get the confidence, and send an email, send a connection on LinkedIn. Most people are really flattered to at least talk to you a bit about what they think. And I think informal mentors and connections like that can end up making a huge difference also. I think sometimes it's a little daunting if somebody reaches out or you reach out to someone and say, hi, do you want to spend this much time talking to me or doing it this way? And I think there's a really so I always really encourage people to reach out, even though it's really hard sometimes, because it's kind of what's the worst that's going to happen? Somebody may not write back, or they may take a little while. I have a little problem with that sometimes on LinkedIn. But try always respond. And I think a lot of people want to do that. So I think that used to be really scary to me too. But now I'm kind of like, okay, this person is really interesting. If they don't reach out, and it's amazing to me, how many people, especially in risk, ethics, and compliance, are flattered and excited to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It is, and it can be intimidating, especially if you are a young professional who, and young, not even young professional, but we as even women feel imposter syndrome that we don't even belong, in the setting. And so there's all those things happening in our heads, but we gotta step away from that, because like you mentioned, there are folks that are willing to talk to you, and then there are some that are not. But it doesn't mean that you can't seek to find people within your realm of I would say your space that can that you can emulate and look and to try to learn what they do. So like one of the folks who I call as a mentor didn't even know that they were a mentor. For me, because it wasn't a formalized mentorship relationship, but it was just someone that I valued their input, and someone who on a consistent basis gave me guidance. And so while we didn't have like the formal title of mentor mentee, I valued and viewed that person as a mentor. And so it doesn't have to be a formal relationship. There are people within your organizations that are leaders that you may look up to. And so all it takes is to build a relationship with that person and learn from them. And sometimes that's all that's needed. I know that folks shy away from formal commitments because, number one, people don't like to commit. But two, sometimes it feels like work and we're all busy. But I think though some of those informalized relationship buildings go a long way for people. Just reach out to folks. It doesn't take much to provide someone with guidance or feedback or ways that they can do something better. I think that goes a long way as opposed to formalized mentorships. But we are doing that so that we can be affirmative and building relationships and have that. But the goal is by creating this formalized structure within NABCRMP, that those relationships that are built will happen organically and will carry on throughout the professional's career. So we're really building relationships as opposed to mentorships. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. I believe I have a lot of mentors. Some may or may not know that I consider them that. And it's almost like, I feel like it's like a kitchen cabinet sometimes, because there's one person that is my, person I really can talk about, one issue with or another thing. And I think, over time, those relationships build. And I think the combination of both structures is what's really important. And I think that also the whole mentorship relationship works both ways, because when I talk to people who, people I consider my mentors, I'm learning, but people who will reach out to me, especially people who are younger or newer in the field, they have great ideas and great thoughts, and the things that, again, we talked about it in terms of NABCRMP, but diversity of viewpoints, that I don't need anyone else to tell me what I personally think. I need them to challenge me and help me grow and evolve on that, professionally, personally, and all of that. So, I think that is, we've talked about this. I'm guessing this is probably one of the things you're looking the most forward to in NABCRMP for now, for 2022.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That, and of course, we have also, we will be doing this year for the first time a student conference and a college career fair. So there are a number of universities, collegiate programs that have specific focus programs on training and preparing individuals for careers in risk governance and compliance. And so one of the things that we were fortunate enough to have at the annual summit was lots of sponsorship from some of those collegiate programs. And so we are trying to provide them with a space to connect with students and young professionals, or even transitioning professionals who may want to switch careers, with the opportunity to learn about programs that may make them more competitive and marketable for those opportunities. And then the student conference portion of that will focus on building awareness around risk governance and compliance. And so with students, I think you have to be a lot more visual in order to draw them in. So I think a lot of us grew up knowing about the different careers that are available: lawyer, doctor, accountant, but no one says risk officer, compliance. So they don't know what those things are. And so really unpacking those terms. What are we talking about when we say risk management? What are we talking about when we say compliance management? What is governance? Why is that important to organizations? And so doing that sort of awareness campaign, I think is going to be great for that kind of conference setting. And then also being able to, like I said, pair them up with universities and collegiate programs that are going to train them or to prepare them to be marketable for those roles is going to be a really, really great thing to see. And so we're looking to do that in May. And then one of the other things we'll be doing, aside from the two that I just mentioned, the mentorship and the student conference, is also a career fair. So one of the things that I think I just mentioned this with the corporate members and the corporate sponsors we have, they have a number of opportunities. There are a countless number of roles that have emerged due to our climate. We are in an evolving climate. Regulations are being promulgated, and there's just lots of things that organizations are subject to and trying to manage. And risk is coming from every single angle that you can think of. And the pandemic doesn't make things easier. So as a result of that, lots of roles have emerged in governance, risk, and compliance. And so we have been inundated with opportunities, and we provide our corporate members with the platforms to post those roles, to post jobs and other requisitions and internships on our websites and our social networking platforms. But what we want to do with this career fair is to bring the recruiters, bring the organizations and the job candidates all into one place, and to allow the recruiters to speak about their organizations themselves and to meet with young professionals, candidates, or whoever may be interested in learning more about their organization. And so that way there is a direct connection to the talent. And as far as we know, there's not really anything like that focuses mostly on diverse talent. But we want to make this a cyclical event where we always bringing the industry or providing them with an opportunity to directly interface with folks who are looking for these opportunities. And so lots is happening.
Well, one other thing I want to ask a little bit about, especially since we're talking during Black History Month, and we've talked a lot, and DE&I is obviously a huge part of what you're doing and the work you do in the intersection between risk and compliance and DEI. Like we said earlier on, the idea of the importance of the diverse viewpoints, and you're saying, but when we're compliance professionals talking about this, how do you best make that business case or raise it to in your organization or in others? And I guess along with that, how can we best encourage diversity generally as part of the business case and also as part of our teams and organizations?
Aside from it being just general value add, Lisa, I definitely think that there are many ways that the compliance professional or just anyone within an organization that functions in our climate can make a business case, because like it or not, D&I is here to stay. It's for the long term. And in this day and age where employee and customer loyalty are growing increasingly tied to an organization's ethics and their social values, it really puts an organization, on the outs if they fail to create environments that are diverse, that are seen as being equitable, that are inclusive. And so no organization wants to be at a competitive disadvantage. The way that consumers choose products and services now have changed. Mm-hmm. They have changed. So back in the day, I think, and I know folks are going to be like, how old are you? I'm old enough to remember, but back in the day, folks chose the organization that they patronize by price, right? So there's price, but there's by how valuable the service is. They chose things based off of the functionality. But now we're moving beyond that. So the consumers and these millennials, Generation Zers, they're looking beyond those things. What they want to know and what they want to relate to is an organization that aligns with their core values. And an organization that is not in alignment with that is not something that they want to patronize. So the mindset is different. And so organizations are forced to adapt to that, and they should adapt to that. Otherwise, they risk being at a competitive disadvantage. And so that's the business case, because if you don't evolve with your customers, with your clients, with your suppliers, you're going to be left on the outs, because that's where things are headed. And it's not just a national trend, it's international. Yeah. The internet has made things much more open, much more global. And so that means clients are global, and they expect you to keep up with that. They expect you to be responsive to them. They expect you to value them as customers. And to do that, you have to take into consideration their diverse perspectives. And your teams need to reflect who you're serving in the community.
Yeah. And your team needs to also reflect what the community should be. as well.
Exactly.
And I think there's two parts, and there are a lot of parts to that. I mean, I have to say, the more DEI, it grows, and it grows in a genuine way. I think one of the things I started my career at a law firm is that I think that was a long time ago, but you kind of, all of us, you adapted to what to wear, how to be, and to what the organization was. And I think it's been excellent to see organizations looking outward and saying, this is what the world looks like. Let's, make ourselves a part of that.
Yeah. And I was just going to add one thing about that too, Lisa. To do that, it can't be forced, right? It has to be something that the organization truly believes, right? So tying it to the business case is great, but it needs to be a part of the core value, right? So it needs to be tied. Otherwise, it's not gonna happen, And because it is often tied to business objectives, there is easily a way to integrate that into the organization's values and missions. We, for example, an organization should value diversity and inclusion because it seeks to serve a very diverse community, diverse body of clients. And so it's very easy to embed that in the organization's core values. And once it's a core values, you can action it, right? But if it's not a value of the organization, then it will never happen. The organization will rebel against it and see it as just simply work. So it has to be in the culture of the organization in order to sustain long-term inclusion, long-term diversity.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining me to talk about all of these different issues. I'm thrilled whenever we get this opportunity. Again, for those, you'll see when this comes out, a link to NABCRMP will, and Jennifer is terrific, as it looks like their whole leadership team is. And again, I think all of us, I shouldn't say all, but almost everyone I speak with, at least, really is trying to improve, our communities and our profession. And we thank you for helping us do that. And I think particularly during Black History Month, is a really good time for us to reflect, particularly in our organizations. What are we doing now? What are we learning? How can we keep moving forward? And I really appreciate you being part of the discussion with us. So on behalf of the Great Women in Compliance and Mary and me, thank you so much, Jennifer, and everyone have a great day.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Great Women in Compliance. We hope you'll join us in honoring the great women in the compliance field by subscribing to this podcast and leaving a review.